Hello, welcome to Why Wait Till Sunday. It is Tuesday. We are recording a non-DFS version of our show and going to go into my Devy ranks for class of 2022. So that's not this upcoming rookie class, but the expected players who will be in the rookie class for 2022. That would be guys who just finished up their sophomore years and expected to declare early, or just finished up their junior years and expected to declare after next year as seniors. So we're going to go over quarterbacks today, and then we'll have increments of other shows so that it doesn't take up too long for each video. These are meant to be quick hitters, just to get some guys on your radar who may not already be, and also explain a little bit of the process, why they're ranked at these spots. So again, looking ahead, what is this class going to look like? We're already in the off season now, so we know there's going to be tons of rookie content, but this is looking to the next class, so we're prepared. The quarterbacks who are going to be in 2022 is headlined by Sam Howell. He is pretty easily, for me, the QB1 in the class. He improved his accuracy this year at UNC with a 69% completion percentage. That's just wonderful. And 10 yards per attempt, which is up from last year. So he went up his completion percentage about 8 points. Increased his yards per attempt. Those are both just tremendous numbers. And I think those are really the most important things that you need to look for in a quarterback. I mean, the raw stats are nice, but that can be inflated by a system that throws a lot. And things like that. But when you're accurate completing these passes and you are pushing the ball downfield as evidenced by the yards per attempt, that is great for me. He blew up as a true freshman and really just improved in year two. There's not much more to say. Sam Howell, QB1, on track to be the number one overall pick in 2022. That's very much in play for him. The guy who's now bumped up to 2 is Spencer Rattler. This was the number one quarterback in his class. He sat behind Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma in year 1. And I think he's been quietly great in year 2. I know there's some people that think he's been underwhelming. I think he's been great. His completion percentage is up near 70%. His yards per attempt is 9.5. I have no problems there. My good Twitter friend, Devy Kane, who I respect a whole lot, has some issues with Rattler and says when you watch him, he's not really pushing the ball downfield. Yards per attempt says he is, 8.2 is actually the bar. So he's well over that for me at 9.5. 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I'll admit that the overall gaudy stats are not really there. In 10 games, he has 2,700 yards. That's these guys, pushing in college, pushing 4,000 yard seasons. But it's been a weird year. This was his first year starting because he redshirted as a true freshman. I think he's been really good. If nothing else, he's been incredibly accurate as he has gotten his feet wet. This season, not the raw numbers, but the efficiency is better than Sam Howell's first year. It's right up there with Sam Howell's second year, to be honest with you. And this was his first year starting, even though it was his second year in college. I think he's been very, very good. He chips in on the ground. I mean, that's not a huge part of his game, but he can get you yards on the ground. He's in that I use all the time, the Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Luck, these guys who certainly not like read option dynamos or anything like that, but they are smart quarterbacks and they can scramble around and get 20, 30, 40 yards a game. And Rattler can certainly do that. But his real talent, I think, is just accuracy. When he throws the ball, he's got a quick release. He looks like he makes NFL throws. I think maybe he hasn't pushed the ball downfield and he's been more kind of that take what the defense gives you type guy rather than forcing the issue. But he seems very much like a guy who's going to eliminate mistakes. And hopefully next year we'll see some more progression. We don't have to close the book on Rattler. Right now, he's my QB2 in the class. I think the ceiling is very, very high on him. And I would like to see some more of the gaudy stats. I'd like to see him just tear defenses apart, which hasn't quite happened. I will admit to that. But again, incredibly efficient, incredibly accurate. Looks like his arm has all the throws in it that you need. So pretty excited about Spencer Rattler, and he's been bumped up to QB 2 now that we've seen what he can do in live game action. My QB3 is Kedon Slovis, down from my previous QB1. And, the offense, the entire USC offense looked clunky this year. And, I think you can blame a lot, especially the Pac-12 and the Big 10/12, is their seasons were just insane. I mean, they were very, very weird, clunky seasons, missed games, in and out of practicing, in and out of, remote, practicing versus in person. It's just very strange season. I will definitely concede the fact that Slovis did not look like the same exact player he did as a true freshman, and he certainly didn't seem to take a step forward. If anything, there was a bit of a step backwards for him. In terms of the fantasy lens, he doesn't offer the rushing upside that you want to see. He's a pure pocket passer, and he's very good at that. In 2 years, he's got 70% completion percentage over his first 2 years in the NCAA. I mean, that is just insane. His yards per attempt was 8.9 as true freshman, dropped down to 7.3 this year. But for an average of 8.3, that's still over the bar. So when you combine his accuracy and his yards per attempt, he's not dinking and dunking, although 2020 was a little bit more of that dink and dunk. And that could be a function of the offense. I mean, I don't think his coaching staff, Clay Helton and company, is great. When you watch the offense, it just didn't look explosive, even though they have explosive players. To me, Slovis's calling card is, what's between the ears, pocket management, keeping his eyes up, keeping plays alive, not with necessarily true scrambling, but keeping everything in play, even when the pocket might break down. I think at the next level, he's going to be a guy. I've been comparing him to Drew Brees, not even necessarily because they remind me of each other on film, but just like for him to be really good, especially for fantasy, you're going to need a high volume attack to utilize his ability to get accurate, quick passes out to his receivers and rack up yards that way. He's not going to be a Mahomes, Justin Herbert, where he's just rifling the ball 40 yards to a pinpoint hole, on the sideline to some receiver who's, with someone draped all over him, like that kind of thing. But I think in the right system, he's got the ability to manage games. And if a coach wants to say, you are controlling the offense, you're the point guard distributing the ball to everybody, and you can rack up yards and points that way, I think he can be very successful. It seems to me that is how he's going to really succeed and be able to produce for our fantasy team. So he's not a lock and load anymore. This class for quarterbacks was looking absolutely incredible with those 3. And now I think it's pretty much Howell in a tier of his own. Rattler, Slovis, very good potential in tier 2. And then we have the next tier, I would say, is going to be JT Daniels. The guy who Slovis actually stole his job after he got injured. Now, Daniels was the number 1 QB in his class 3 years ago now. This is now his 3rd year. He started as a freshman, got injured as a sophomore, and now this is his 3rd year, I guess, redshirt sophomore year at Georgia. And he had a weird beginning to his career at Georgia. Georgia had no quarterbacks to speak of. They were starting Stetson Bennett, like a JUCO grad transfer or something. He was just completely unimpressive. They went to another guy who was completely useless as a quarterback. And then finally, there was rumors about his health. There's COVID issues maybe with Daniels, but finally, he came and started for the Bulldogs. And you know what? They looked like a completely different team. I'm a Gator, and they did not play Daniels when they faced us, and I am very thankful because I think he could have picked us apart. That game would have been completely different. He revolutionized what that offense can do, what that offense looks like. I mean, it was just a complete makeover when he started. He started for 3 games with a 66.7% completion percentage. He had 10.4 yards per attempt, 9 touchdowns in 3 games to only 1 interception. I mean, I think it's not hyperbole to say he blew the doors off that Georgia offense and really got it to click. He got George Pickens going. He got Jermaine Burton, the true freshman, going. And, it just, Kearis Jackson got in on the action as well. Absolutely incredible. And I'm concerned for the SEC East next year as, with him in place, I don't think he's going to, declare for the NFL now with only 3 games under his belt, but future is bright. The arm is expectedly live. He seems to make NFL style throws. This is the pocket passer, kind of a little more in that mold of, a Herbert, a Mahomes. I'm not saying he is those guys, but when you watch him, he chucks that ball in the way where, cross field, 40 yards downfield to the corner of the end zone, he can put it right there. And so, his arms, he was looking like he was making NFL type throws, big arm. And if this continues, I think there's a very good chance he jumps Slovis for me. Outside chance he jumps Rattler. He can get all the way up, I think, with a huge next year at Georgia. Spotlight's going to be on SEC competition, make the playoff, etc. And spotlight's going to be all over JT Daniels. And I think you can see him have a humongous rise. I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility he challenges for the number 1 QB spot over Howell if he completely goes bananas in 2021. But I think it's safe to say he's a big time riser and, squarely back on the prospect map, at least for me. Dillon Gabriel for UCF comes in at number 5, and this is a big teardrop. So you've got Howell, Rattler, Slovis kind of jockeying underneath, JT Daniels in his own spot as a big riser with pedigree and serious NFL tools, at a major university. All those check boxes are done. And so then there's a big teardrop and we get down to some group of 5 teams, which, especially at quarterback is going to be a bit of an issue to get your draft capital and things like that. But Dillon Gabriel comes in. He has just dominated since his true freshman year. And in 2020, about the same guy. He put up tons of stats. They throw the ball a ton. His raw stats were incredibly impressive. And this is, to me, kind of that difference between, Rattler did not put up the sheer numbers. However, Rattler was a better quarterback than, Dillon Gabriel. Gabriel's sitting at 60% completion, about the same as last year. Only 8.6 yards per attempt. So kind of a little inefficient there. Still not terrible, but that's actually a step back from last year. Tons and tons of touchdowns, 32 touchdowns in 10 games, only 4 interceptions. So, taking care of the ball. Josh Heupel's system, though, at UCF is certainly going to encourage those kinds of monster numbers. They run a ton of, stretch the field vertically, chuck it up to single coverage. They do it a lot. They had a guy, Marlon Williams, this year who was able to, dominate some of those DBs in that system down there in the competition that they're facing. So I'm a little concerned Gabriel's numbers are more of a product of this incredible system that Heupel runs. And, I'm not sure that he is going to be the kind of quarterback to make, some of the throws you're going to have to make in the NFL. A lot of what he does is chuck it up single coverage way down the field, and his receivers come down with it. So that means he's putting the ball, there, but that's not going to, if that's your main game, that's not going to cut it at the next level. He's sitting at 5 for me. I think that's pretty tenuous. The guys behind him kind of are risers, so I haven't quite put them ahead of him because he does have 2 years, in the bank, playing very well. Just kind of concerned his skill set is, actually going to translate. So there's a pretty big teardrop. When we start asking a lot of these concerning questions after JT Daniels, this whole group is very messy. And we're talking mid-day, mid-draft type quarterbacks, probably, maybe even late draft quarterbacks. Greyson McCall comes in at QB 6 here behind Dillon Gabriel, but this is one where he can jump him pretty quickly with another good year next year. He was a redshirt freshman this year for Coastal Carolina. He has some absolutely incredible numbers this year coming out of almost nowhere. Coastal Carolina, G5 conference, redshirt freshman, didn't hardly play last year. And all of a sudden, he is the third highest graded passer in the PFF college system. He came in with a 68% completion percentage. He's got 10 yards per attempt. What's really nice is he chips in on the ground. He has 100 carries for almost 600 yards and 7 touchdowns on the ground. I mean, he's kind of a true dual threat, and really has a live arm and an accurate arm, which is, more important when you're trying to think about translating to the next level. His biggest game was probably against BYU, and yes, it was pretty ugly. That game was on short notice. They made it so that they could play against a big-name opponent. He only had 85 yards on 15 attempts, 12 attempts on the ground for 68 yards. Totally nondescript. They won that game, though, but really was not because of Greyson McCall. He also had a big game against Liberty, who has a pretty good defense, and he was really nice there. 21 of 32, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, 15 for 96 on the ground, and another touchdown. So that was a really big game in their bowl against a pretty good Liberty defense. We're going to have to see another year adding to his body of work. Maybe they'll get a nice matchup against a tough opponent to see how he handles kind of a big boy defense a little bit. Really nice redshirt freshman year to put him on the map for me there. And then we have Carson Strong, another riser, a little darling out in Nevada. And a lot of times we pick guys up when other people tweet about them or whatever. I can't keep track of all whatever it is, 180, FBS teams that are in the college football database. So I've come across him. Some people have been tweeting about him. He's a redshirt sophomore. He started a couple of games last year as a redshirt freshman, put up some decent numbers, 63% completion last year, but only 6.2 yards per attempt. I'm not thrilled with that. But again, it took a step this year. He had 70% completion, which is huge. Very impressed with that. His 8.1 yards per attempt, not gonna blow me over, that's for sure. His career now stands at 7.1. He needs to get that up for me, or at the very least, he needs to get close to 9 yards per attempt by the time he comes out for me to be real excited about his potential, because I'm not that impressed with a completion percentage that, doesn't include pushing the ball downfield. When you get to the NFL, you've got to be able to challenge all areas of the field, and you also have to be accurate. So these guys, the bar for me is at least 65% completion, probably, pushing 70%. Is getting into the elite territory. So that's great, but you've got to have, 8.2, I think is kind of that median for future success in the NFL, but I'd love to see 8.5 or higher. So, he's got a little bit to go there, but a big time riser for me. And certainly one to keep an eye on out in Nevada, especially, from the G5 conference, that you got to be kind of even better than someone from a Power 5 conference to me. Jaden Daniels, you're probably wondering why I haven't said his name yet. He is my QB 8 in this class, and I think that's a bit of a hot take compared to what I hear other people talking about. I don't see it. This guy has struggled to complete passes in his career so far. He started as a true freshman, and I'm willing to give a pass as a true freshman. And 60% completion, not awful. Certainly seen much worse. 17 touchdowns, only 2 picks, so that is nice. And 8.7 yards per attempt. Okay, we can work with this. But he was a distant, behind he was never in tier 1 for me anyway. And then we regressed this year. Now, granted, I'm going to give the Pac-12 a bit of a pass, but the big concern is going back from an already not impressive completion percentage down to 58%. Now we're bordering in I don't really want to touch this prospect if he can't even get to 60%. Yards per attempt dropped 8.3. And the difference is, Slovis dropped, but was still well above any threshold that I'm looking for. Daniels wasn't quite there and then regressed. So, I'm taking a step back from Daniels at this time. and I hope he comes back, but he needs to blow the doors off as a junior for me to really jump in there. It's possible with a normal offseason and a normal season next year. I'm not closing the book. But for now, there's a lot of other guys I think are climbing and making a name for themselves, and he's going to have to climb back into the conversation, to even get to be a high pick, a guy that we're talking about, like a team's going to view him as their cornerstone quarterback. Matt Corral, QB9. This guy is very fun. His play style is kind of all over the place for Ole Miss, but he came in this year at 71% completion percentage. That's huge. 10.6 yards per attempt. Both of those way, way up from last year where he looked like he was trending in the wrong way. So, of course, guys like Daniels I just talked about, I mean, we can see a big leap the next year. So Corral is now a redshirt sophomore. It is his third year, and he took a big leap. 71% completion percentage. I mean, that's really impressive in the SEC. Really, really, really strong performance this year. 27 touchdowns in 9 games. You got to love to see that. 14 interceptions. That is a problem. That is a big problem. You don't normally see this. I mean, that completion percentage at 71% and that many interceptions. I mean, it's like almost every incompletion was to the other team. Big, big problem. You can't make that many mistakes. You can't be that careless with your throws, especially at the next level. That he's going to have to really clean that up. Now, there's a big jump from last year. So, maybe it was an anomaly somehow. But I need that to be cleaned up, and so will NFL people when they're evaluating him. But super fun, exciting arm, and he plays, kind of with this reckless abandon, running around, making things happen. And so he's QB9. I think, he's already said he's coming back for his redshirt junior year and clean some things up. He could make a name for himself. I really think that's in play for him. So really interesting name there, Matt Corral. And finally, my QB10 in the class, Dustin Crum. He plays for Kent State. This is obviously a G5 team. That gives you a tough bar to get over to get into the NFL side. But he's just been really good now for 2 years. I think he's going to come back as a fifth-year senior. So, he'll have another year under his belt. For quarterback, especially at a G5, you don't see these guys come out early very often. That doesn't bother me too much at the quarterback position. He's shown incredible accuracy, almost 70% last year, 73% this year completion percentage. He went from an 8.4 yards per attempt last year, jacked up to 10.5 yards per attempt this year. 12 touchdown. He's got in the last 2 years, he's got 32 touchdown passes compared to only 4 interceptions. I mean, the guy is doing it against some weaker competition, of course, in the MAC, but he is shredding these defenses out here. Not making mistakes. He chips in on the ground a pretty good amount. Had 700 yards last year and 240 yards this year on the ground, and added 10 total touchdowns over the last 2 years running the football. So, from fantasy perspective, which is what we're always talking about, if this guy gets a chance, I'm very interested. The chance is really why he's all the way down to QB10. Coming from the MAC, coming from Kent State, who really never sniffed the field until his junior season. I think, day 2 draft capital is probably his absolute best case scenario. More likely going to be day 3 coming out of that conference unless something really changes next year. But we've seen these guys, you go into the NFL, you stick on a team, and, injury happens, you come on, and maybe he can do something. I think he's a very deep quarterback, super flex dynasties and things like that to keep an eye on, because his name is still pretty much untalked about. And I just really like him. I liked him a lot last year. Loved him this year. I mean, in DraftKings on the Maction Tuesday, he was just an absolute smash. You never even considered fading Dustin Crum. And another little note here, top 12 in the NCAA in deep ball completion percentage. I really like that. That says this arm can get the ball downfield. He also did have a big drop in his completion percentage when under pressure. So obviously that's something that is going to need to get tweaked or improve, or, maybe when we get to the NFL, we'll see if he can get better there. But that's Dustin Crum. Really like him. That rounds out my top 10 for the 2022 class. And then there's some wild cards. These guys are not going to be ranked for me at the moment, but I want to throw some names out there. Brock Purdy is a faller. He is now out of the top 10, but he came back and had a strong finish to the year. I think he's probably going to return to college, and so he'll be a full-blown senior when he comes out. I'm not writing him off completely. Michael Penix took a big step back this year. Last year, he was very, very good. I thought he would go forward, but again, we're talking about the Big 12. There was a lot of issues with the Big 12 and consistency and the rhythm and all that sort of thing. But he took a pretty big step back in completion percentage under 60%, and his yards per attempt both slid. And, watching him, he just looks raw. And that's stuff you can teach. You can clean that up. You can teach him mechanics. But he just, Sharp, Felix Sharp of the Sharp Review is a great video watcher. He's been in on Penix. We talk about him a lot on Twitter, and he concedes as well. His footwork is ugly. His mechanics, are inconsistent. So sometimes he looks great. Sometimes he looks very rickety back there. And so, he's going to need to clean that up. That's why he's not in my top 10 right now. He's got some work to do. Malik Willis blew up onto the scene for Liberty after transferring from Auburn. This guy was incredible this year. I am talking, he went absolutely bananas. So they played Syracuse, Virginia Tech, and won. North Carolina State and lost, in which that was Malik's worst game, 3 interception game there. And then Coastal Carolina and won. They had a 10-1 season, and it was a smashing success, and he was incredible all over the field. He's one of these quarterbacks that's the full-blown offense. He had 2,200 passing yards. He had almost 1,000 rushing yards in 10 games and 14 rushing touchdowns to go with 20 passing touchdowns in 10 games. The guy accounted for 34 total touchdowns in his 10 games. That is pretty phenomenal. He had 64% completion percentage, 8.5 yards per attempt. These are numbers that are above the threshold that gets you on my list. The rushing component is obviously the huge deal here for fantasy purposes. Very excited to see what he can do. I mean, he's got prospect pedigree. He originally signed with Auburn. He left because they were committed to Bo Nix. I don't blame him. I do blame Auburn because Bo Nix is absolutely terrible. I think Malik Willis, I know he did that against Liberty's schedule, but he would not have been worse than Bo Nix. There's no way. And if anything else, he runs like the Dickens and would have been, great, I think, as a runner in that offense. I think they made a humongous mistake, and excited to see what Willis can do at Liberty in his next year. He'll be, I think, a 4th-year senior or 5th-year senior by then. And he should be on the map. I actually sent out a tweet earlier today with Zach Wilson and Willis's stats versus 2 common opponents. They both played Western Kentucky and they both played Coastal Carolina. Zach Wilson, of course, is the upcoming rookie class, and some people say the number 2 overall pick. And Malik Willis is barely being talked about. Their stats weren't that different. Obviously, Willis contributes a ton more on the ground, but Willis actually had a better completion percentage and similar yards per attempt in those games. Probably not a big enough gap to say that one should be the number 2 overall pick and the other one's not even being talked about. So I think there needs to be a correction. Either Wilson may not be quite so good, or maybe Willis really needs to be discussed. And I think, for next year, he is a one to watch. I could easily see him jumping into the top 10, maybe, even as high as a mid-range type guy. If he dominates again and maybe takes another step forward as a passer, we could be looking at a guy who is bandied about as a first-round pick potentially. I mean, why not? Trey Lance is going to be a top 15 pick and with 1 year on his record at North Dakota State because the tools are so enticing. I know he did it at a younger age than Willis, but it's not out of the question. We've seen crazier things before. Joe Burrow was basically undraftable to number 1 overall pick. I don't think it's out of play. Willis can have that type of season again next year, and get himself into first round conversation. Then we have Derek King. He's coming from Miami. Real concerning that he didn't just go this year after a pretty good year at Miami. Must have gotten feedback. The NFL is just not that interested. So for, Devy purposes going forward in the college to the NFL transition, can't be too excited about that just because he had a great year. What's going to happen next year to make them, he's already been on the map. He's had good years at Houston. He now had a good year at Miami. Seems like the NFL is like, thanks, but no thanks. You're a backup. So seems like that could be the case. But again, the skill set's there. The running is there. We want that. If he ever gets an opportunity, very interesting prospect, Derek King. Finally, Brennan Armstrong. This guy is super interesting. I imagine, unless you're a hardcore Devy player or a college fantasy player, this guy's not really on your radar. But he's a dual threat guy for Virginia. And started as a redshirt sophomore this year, won the job, 58% completion. He's got some work to do. He needs to clean up some things. 58% completion, 7.9 yards per attempt, but almost 600 yards on the ground in 9 games. Again, one of these quarterbacks that is the whole offense, and that's what we want when we're talking about fantasy. We don't want our quarterbacks to hand off to the running back. We want them to run it themselves and be good enough with the arm. So he's one to watch. Anytime someone's going to contribute that much on the ground and basically be their team's leading rusher, in addition to being their quarterback, I am taking notice. He did have the most rush attempts on Virginia this year. Most rushing yards, tied for the most rushing touchdowns. So anytime a quarterback is the entire offense, I am interested. As long as you can even squint and see an NFL arm, which for Armstrong, maybe that's not there, but certainly one to watch. And we can see that growth as the redshirt junior season approaches. That is your quarterback list for 2022. Hit the subscribe button. Follow me all off season. We're going to keep doing this, keep releasing. We've got the rest of 2022 to do. We got 2023. We'll go even into 2024, talk about incoming freshmen. You need to be prepared, whether in your Dynasty, certainly in Devy. I think you already know that. But, even if you're in Dynasty, you're trading away and trading for 2022 picks, 2023 picks. You need to put a face to those players. You can't just say, give me a second round 2023 pick. Who's that guy going to be? You got to put faces to these picks. That's how you make good trades. That's how you get ahead of the game. So hit subscribe. Tell me what you think of my list in the comments, and let's build on this in this offseason. Why wait till Sunday? There's a lot of things happening on Saturday, DFS, but also watching these players and finding out what they can do for your fantasy teams. I am Alfred, and I will see you later.